As more people return to work, some are being blindsided by changes made to the terms of their employment during the pandemic, while others still temporarily laid off or finding out they may be out of a job for much longer than originally anticipated. And joining us now with more on some of those changes and what rights you're entitled to is employment lawyer Lior Samfiru. Good morning, Lior. So let's start off with news out this week that Ontario has extended a COVID-19 program impacting the duration of layoffs. Can you tell us about that program and what employees need to know?
Sure. The Infectious Disease Emergency Leave is something that was created by the Ontario provincial government back in the spring of 2020, essentially to allow employers to temporarily lay off employees without that being considered a termination, allowing the employees to still be considered employees. So that period of time was initially going to expire in the summer of 2020. It now has been extended numerous times, I think 4 or 5 times. And now that period of time has been extended again till January of 2022. Now, what happens then is you may have some employees that have been put on a layoff back a year and a half ago at the beginning of the pandemic that were expecting to go back to work and are just now finding out that, wait, we're not going to be back to work at least until January unless it's extended again. Now, despite that, despite what I just said, our courts have said that that layoff, that infectious disease emergency leave, if you've been put on a leave like that, that can still be considered a termination. That can still give the right to the employee to consider that as being terminated and to get their severance. So employees have that option. And I think that employees that were expecting to go back to work now in this month may now say, enough is enough. I've been off for too long. I'm now going to consider myself to be terminated. So it's possible that this leave will have the opposite effect of what the government intended it to.
So much to deal with right now. What can you tell us about, say, other changes to someone's job description? We're hearing reports of even Canadian airlines asking managers to pick up more duties, everything from assisting travelers in wheelchairs to doing more customer service. How much flexibility does an employer have in making changes to the terms of employment?
Well, Candace, let's be clear. This is not a theoretical issue. I have seen this en masse since the beginning of the pandemic, jobs being changed. And you mentioned some changes where other responsibilities have been added. I've seen many other changes, such as changes to hours, to shifts, changes to compensations, maybe employer not being able to offer or able to pay as much, so they're changing the compensation, relocations. All of these are significant changes. So in terms of the law, an employer does not have the right to make significant changes to the terms of employment. Now, what is significant will be different in every case. If your shift has changed from 9 to 5 to 8:30 to 4:30, that may not be significant. But if you've been changed from morning to afternoons, that may well be significant. And whenever we're talking about these changes, the term constructive dismissal comes to mind. An employee can choose to treat a change like that as a termination and get their severance. So those are options that are available to employees.
Okay, so what advice do you have for employers who want to have the flexibility to make necessary changes to those terms of employment?
Well, what's important is to have a proper employment agreement in place. An employer can do pretty much anything with a proper employment agreement. So not just download something off of Google. You have to ensure that your agreement gives you certain flexibilities and certain rights. So that's number one. Number two is an employer can also give advance notice of a change. With sufficient advance notice, an employer may be able to impose a change that otherwise would not be illegal. So those are two things that employers have to do to legally make changes to terms of employment.
And what should an employee do if they're facing a change or a new term of employment?
Keep in mind that an employee that accepts a change may be then stuck and may give their employer the right to do it again. So if you don't want that to happen, you have to put in writing that you don't accept the change. Make sure that your employer understands that's not okay. You can also tell your employer, I'm going to try it first. I'm going to see how it goes. And if then I'm not happy, then we may have a different discussion. That's very important. And finally, always have to get legal advice whenever we're talking about a constructive dismissal. It could be nuanced and complex, so that's always going to be a good idea.
Okay, thanks as always. That's Lior Samfiru, employment lawyer. Thanks again. Have a good one.